Oh, hi. Didn't see you there. I guess let's get started. So, evidence of evolution. I want to remind you that evolution is just change over time, right? So, we're just looking at how organisms on the earth have changed throughout the history of the earth, and how we have gotten to basically all of the organisms that we have now, right? So I just want to remind you that we have 2 more weeks left, and so this week we are going into the evidence stuff, which is kind of fun, but then more fun is natural selection, and that will be the second week. That'll be the last week. Normally, this stuff takes me like a whole month of you guys being in class every day, us doing a bunch of stuff. So this is gonna be real condensed. Okay, just want to remind you everything that's typed out in red. Write that down. So write down this title. This is the title of our notes. And then the first thing that we're going to go over as far as pieces of evolution or evidences of evolution is fossils. So let's get started. All right, fossils. Number one, write these things down. These are in red. So fossils show us change over time because we have something called the fossil record. And so if you look at this chart here and imagine that all of these different colored bands are layers of earth, and actually in the earth they're called strata. The layers are called strata. So in these different layers we find different fossils of things, right? And the farther down we go, the older these, this is like, I don't have room, but the younger fossils and then the older fossils, right? The farther you go down, it's like your laundry basket. At the bottom of your laundry basket is the oldest, dirtiest, nastiest stuff. At the top is like not that old and not that dirty yet. So anyway, so basically near the bottom of the fossil record, we find fish. Okay, fish are some ancient organisms, right? They are actually the first vertebrates, the first things that have a backbone. Next, up a little bit higher in the fossil record, we have amphibians, and then reptiles, and mammals, and birds. Okay, so we know that they appeared in this order on Earth because that's the order that we find them in the fossil record. So that's just kind of how that works. The fossil record shows us the timeline a little bit, right? So it shows us the change over time, and then also it shows us something else called transitional species. These are really cool. I'm going to show you a couple. They are a middle step between an ancient organism and a modern organism. So, like for example, this real ancient fish right here. This guy's an old fish. And then here's, let's say, an amphibian. Well, fossils can show us these transitional species of what was between the fish and the amphibian. Okay, and so actually the first one that I have for you here is a transitional species called Tiktaalik. This guy, I want you to know his name, Tiktaalik. Transitional species between a fish and a tetrapod, right? And so a tetrapod is just something, tetra means four, right? So something with 4 limbs is a tetrapod. And so this guy right here, this derpy looking guy with these derpy eyes, actually is kind of cute, I don't know. This is a transitional species between a fish and a tetrapod. This is kind of like the middle ground between that fish and an amphibian, and we're going to see in a second here that he has characteristics that are both fish-like and amphibian-like. And I wonder if you can just look at him right now and figure it out any, or just like guess any, before I even told you, told you. I'm sure you could figure some out. Okay, so if we think back about the fossil record, right, this is where Tiktaalik fits in. So Tiktaalik here, so this would be older, this is down lower, and this is, this is younger, right? So this is higher up in the fossil record, this is lower down. So we have Devonian era, this is just an era, right? Devonian era fish, and then we have Tiktaalik. And then we have some things like Acanthostega right here, which is just an early amphibian tetrapody guy. And then here we have Ichthyostega, which is also amphibian, reptile-ish, but also still in the Devonian era. Okay, so we find these fossils in this order. Like these ones, these Devonian fish are lower down than the Devonian amphibians, and that tells us that the fish came before the amphibians. And so it's crazy because Tiktaalik comes right in the middle of those, literally in the earth. It is found in between, it is found above the fish and below the amphibians, and that helps us tell us the relative age of Tiktaalik. It comes somewhere in between the fish and the amphibians. Okay, so not only do we see this in the fossil record of where Tiktaalik comes from, but we also see that the traits, it shares traits from fish and and with amphibians. Okay, so let's go to the next slide real quick. Okay, so fish, here's some things about fish. Okay, round heads, eyes on the side. They have this shoulder blade bone here, the shoulder girdle, and it connects directly to the skull. And so for a fish to look around, it doesn't really have a nice neck to look laterally. It's got to turn its whole body a little bit. No ribs here. It's got these fins that are a little bit different. There's different kinds, but that's okay. All right, so, and then let's look at Tiktaalik now. So he's got a neck. It doesn't show it, but he would have some vertebrae right there. So this would be like neck bones, right? He would be able to turn his head a little bit, okay? As opposed to no neck. He's got a flattish head, right? He's got eyes on the top of his head, not on the side. He has different fins, okay? And in fact, people who study the bones of these things talk about how these are more like, they have some, they describe them as modified wrist bones, okay? He also has ribs, okay? Another thing, he has lungs, okay? That's way different than fish. Fish obviously have gills, okay? So over here at the bottom, right, this is the transition, is just the straight up tetrapod, okay? So this guy though, he has both aspects of the tetrapod and aspects of the fish, right? He has scales, fins, he lives in the water, but he also has lungs, wrist bones, neck, ribs, eyes on top, flat head. So characteristics are somewhere in between a fish and a tetrapod. And just real quick to talk about why are some of these things happening, well, he has eyes on the top of his head, and he has these specialized wrist bones so that he can push up out of the water and look for danger and possibly get out of the water if he needs to with those specialized wrist bones, which is pretty cool. Fish couldn't do that, okay? All right, let's keep going because I don't want to make this too long here. We also have some fossils. I just want to show you, and here's a little bit of a timeline. So some of these Eosinopteron, this is the early fish, okay, 395 million years ago. And then we have Ichthyostega. Oh, sorry, I skipped one. I skipped Tiktaalik. 375 million years ago. So that took, check this out, that took 20 million years to get to this. It's not like these things, it seems crazy that this could evolve, but this took 20 million years. It's not like this just happened overnight, right? 20 million years is almost an unfathomable amount of time for us. We just live on such a small scale. Here you can see that flat head and the eyes on the top of the head. Okay. Here is this rendering of what Ichthyostega, the amphibian, might have looked like. Also kind of a derp. But yeah, I just wanted to show you some of the pictures there. Okay, so next we're actually going to move on to another transitional species, and this one is named Archaeopteryx. And this is cool. This is a transition species between dinosaurs and birds, because birds came from dinosaurs. They are very reptilian. So if you look at this fossil here and you look carefully, you can see the outline of feathers all along this thing. Okay, and so that's a very bird-like quality. However, that also has dinosaur-like qualities. Like, look at this tail. This is this long reptilian-like tail, which is not common in modern birds. Let me show you what the tails look like. So here is the difference, right? These long tails like this, where the feathers come out laterally on Archaeopteryx, versus a modern bird where we have the tailbone here and the feathers coming out the end. Now, I just like to point out this rendering, this artist's rendering of what this thing might have looked like based on the fossils, which people are actually pretty good at, and it looks super fierce and scary. And then you look at something like this and you see, oh, these are a bunch of different species of Archaeopteryx, and they're all like little chickens. So, not that terrifying. All right, number 2, we're moving on. We're only on number 2, but that was the longest one. So here we are comparing anatomy, and we're talking about homologous structures. You guys have heard this word homologous before. It just means the same. And so what we're saying is that the limbs of the human and the cat and the whale and the bat, and actually a bunch of other ones too, basically all vertebrates, see all these guys? They are the same. The limb structure, the bone structure of all of these different vertebrates, meaning things with a backbone, they're all the same. And that's because of this. So it says anatomy that is similar in structure due to shared ancestry. So the idea is that all of these different guys, as different as we think they all had a common ancestor. And so this common ancestor had the bone plan that all of these things have. And so let's look at this bone plan real quick. The bone plan is 1 bone, 2 bones, many little bones, hand bones, right? So 1 bone, 2 bones, wrist bones, hand bones, okay? And if we look at all of those things, it's incredible, but all of those bones exist in all of these different organisms. Now, are they exactly the same? No, they're not exactly the same, but that's kind of the point. They have a similar structure due to shared ancestry, but here was the common ancestor, once this thing diverged and became a bunch of different animals, when this happened, or this happens over many, many millions of years, but as this happened, these different animals evolved in different habitats and different ecosystems and environments, and they all required different uses. So a bat, for example, has really long skinny limbs or bones in order to fly. And the whale has a lot thicker, heavier bones because, it kind of flies too through the water. But the water, right, it swims, but the water is a lot denser than the air, and so that has to be a lot bigger and more robust. Also, the whales, or dolphins, or whatever they are bigger too, so they have to have bigger, thicker bones. Okay. Same goes for the cat and the human, or any other ones. They evolved in different environments. They survive and they hunt and they just live in different ways. So these limbs adapted differently to those different animals. Okay, so these limbs are homologous. They are same because of ancestry, but they don't have the same function. No, they do not have the same function. Okay, make sure you got some of what I just talked about. Okay, because there isn't a lot written on the screen, but what I was just saying is really important. So make some notes about that too. All right, here are some more. Just all you'll notice the same bone plan. Okay. All right. Next one, vestigial structures. So vestigial structures let's just read it, are remnants of organs or structures that had a function in an earlier ancestor. So basically, these are just organs or structures that one of our ancestors used to need, but we have evolved away from needing that. So a really cool example is the femur and the pelvis that you can find in whales, right? So you can see that in the skeleton right here. They don't use them anymore, okay? And the idea is that whales actually used to be land-living animals that adapted back into the water. And when I say back into the water, remember, things used to be fish, like fish are the first vertebrates, and then made their way onto land, and so then there were, like, let's say tetrapods, and then back into the water, like whales and dolphins, okay? And I'm actually going to have you watch an additional video about the evolution of whales, this guy right here, and it's actually really cool. It goes through kind of all of the pieces that I've been talking about right now. So you guys are going to watch this, but it also talks about some of the vestigial structures that whales have. Anyway, there are other vestigial structures too. Let's say like wings in flightless birds, right? Like an ostrich. We have tailbones. We don't have tails. That is no longer a useful feature for us. Our appendix is no longer necessary in our bodies, right? So these are just examples of things that show that organisms change over time, right? They change based on their circumstances. So let's go on to the next thing here, okay? I know this is getting long, so I'm gonna move fast. All right, comparative embryology. So if we look at the embryos of all of these different animals, fish, salamander, tortoise, not turquoise, chicken, pig, cow, rabbit, human, and more, any vertebrates you want to name, they all have very similar features as early embryos because it shows we have common ancestry with fish. I'm not saying like humans, the last thing we were fish. No, that's not how that works. There's many intermediate steps, but we share an ancestor with fish way back when. Okay, so here are some of the things. Pharyngeal pouches. These little guys right here, little doodads. That's where the gills in fish evolve, and in humans, the pharyngeal pouches turn into different parts of the head and neck. But you'll notice that all of these embryos have them. All of these embryos also have tails. Okay. We don't have, we have a tail right here, but we don't have a tail right here. Obviously, we don't have tails, so why would we have them? So we use this now as basically evidence of common ancestry with fish, okay? Eyes on the side of the head, same thing. All these guys, eyes on the side of the head, okay? Evidence shows common ancestry. All right, these embryonic traits originate in fish. Okay, fish have all of these features, and so do we. All right, this one is just to show you. Look at all these. What are they? Well, they're these things. Like this becomes, what is that? Like a chicken, and then this becomes a turtle. You can't tell the difference between these two. They're so similar at an early stage. Pretty cool. All right, last thing, DNA and biochemical evidence. So basically, what I want to talk about here real quick is that DNA is common to all living things. If you're a bacteria or a tree or a fungus or a human, you all have the same letters, A's, T's, G's, and C's, and all evolution had to do was modify those to make us different, okay, in different orders. Now, also this chart, okay, more similar animals have more similar molecules. So if we take hemoglobin, which binds to oxygen, so all of these guys have hemoglobin, right? If we look at animals that we would just intuitively think are more similar, a human and a rhesus monkey are more similar than a human and a frog, right? And we can also tell because of the physical characteristics. Well, a human and a rhesus monkey, in the hemoglobin protein, remember proteins are made of amino acids, so there's only 8 amino acids different between us and a rhesus monkey. But between us and that same frog, look, there are 67 differences in the amino acid, okay? In the amino acids of that protein. So more similar animals have more similar molecules. All right, guys. Sorry, I know that was long, but hopefully that is helpful. And let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Wait, I want you to know I'm saying that sarcastically because I don't need that. It doesn't matter. All right, bye.